really traditionally speaking, everyone in the industry over the past 20 years has really been focused on having that infrastructure in their office, right? In their on-prem where, all the applications and software that the company would use to run their business lived on their servers. And so really what you're doing is you're building those walls and fortresses around and protecting the corporate infrastructure. But really over the past 10 years or so, the technology has caught up where a lot of this stuff can now live in the cloud, right? And so you have hosted applications like SaaS applications that live in the cloud, and there's a slow march to the cloud where a lot of this stuff's starting to live. And so that frees up a lot of people from having to work in an office space, and especially in this pandemic situation where people are working from home. Being able to access all of those resources from any location is a critical part of being able to continue your business from a business continuity standpoint. And so protecting that is becoming more and more of a challenge, right? And so you're not protecting your office anymore. You're needing to protect all of the data and applications that live up in the cloud. And so, as you mentioned, not only are these applications moving up to the cloud, but so goes your network, right? So you're seeing a shift from on-prem protection to being able to protect everything that's now in the cloud. And so over the next few years, you'll see more and more people start shifting not only their servers and applications up to the cloud, but their networks as well. And so that's what we're seeing in the industry over the past few years, and continuing to see that over the next few years.
Yeah, and we really see, Meraki as being that step towards those systems, right? A reason that we wanted to move towards looking at the Meraki stack years ago was that it was that bridge that began to move you from locally configured systems where, you were having to monitor and maintain those through some sort of like kind of cobbled together kind of semi-cloud based system. And you would have to do, config backups, and you could push stuff down, but you had to have certain ports open and SSH and all this other stuff, and, SFTP. And so with the Meraki systems, it really is a software defined firewall that is basically being pushed down into a piece of equipment. And those configurations are stored in their cloud environment. Now, the systems will run offline, obviously, if they can't connect to the cloud. They'll maintain a copy of their config, but it makes it so much more effective to be able to manage multiple systems, to get alerts in one single dashboard, to be able to go in and create a configuration prior to deployment, or to be able to replicate a configuration that you currently have into another environment very easily. And so we're watching this march towards moving the edge into virtual switching, virtual routing, virtual firewalling in SaaS-based application software as a service or infrastructure as a service like in Azure. We're watching this sort of thing start to happen, and we're not entirely sure as far as what Cisco's like 5-year roadmap is for this product, but what it feels like to us is that this is the natural progression of, at one point you'll just be able to put the Meraki virtual configuration that you had into a virtual appliance in the cloud or onto a scripted interface that does, basically virtual networking for you. And that whole edge is going to move into a cloud, so that the only thing that you have at your local offices is just a direct internet connection, right? You don't even have to necessarily firewall what's behind it at some point. It's very interesting to see it as it's happening.
To tie it back to SD-WAN is, again, a lot of corporations invested heavily on their connectivity, right? So they would spend tons of money on reliable fiber connections and MPLS connections to connect sites together. And that's very expensive. And so where SD-WAN comes into play is it allows you to really take advantage of some of the cheaper internet connectivity that's out there, like cable modems and DSL modems, and even cellular, as we're getting into 5G and beyond, right? We're getting fast speeds, but you're not having to invest heavily and get locked in necessarily with, very expensive contracts with ISPs, because what software defined wide area networks do is it looks at those connections and it sees the health of those connections, right? And so it as as we talked about before, when you're hosting these applications in the cloud, like Office 365 is a good example, you want to be able to make sure that when you're accessing those services and resources in the cloud, like 365, that you have a good connection, and that's a healthy connection, right? And so if you're starting to use maybe less reliable connections, you want to ensure that you're not compromising that healthy connection to either 365 or whatever service you're using in the cloud. And so where SD-WAN comes into play is if you have multiple connections to your home office, and it's maybe like a cellular or a cable modem, it'll look at the health of that connection, and it's smart enough to say, okay, Office 365 over this cable connection may not be performing very well, so let me there's thresholds that you can set, and it'll swing that over to your secondary connection and make sure that when you're trying to access these services, you're doing it in a way that's reliable, right?